Good evening, everyone. My name is Connie Frey-Spurlock, and I'm a mother, a grandmother, a wife, a professor, a change maker, and a motherless daughter. I wasn't always any of those things, of course. I was my mother's firstborn, her guinea pig, as she often called me. Guinea pigs are cute, but they've also, unfortunately, historically been subject to rather harmful and painful testing. Mama acknowledged both were true for me when she called me her guinea pig. You see, Mama lived with a lot of fear because she was intimately familiar with tragedy, loss, and pain from a very early age. When she was just a toddler, she suffered third-degree burns on her hand and arm in the same drunk driving car crash that killed her father, leaving my granny with 3 young children to care for on her own. As a young girl, she suffered abuse at the hands of men who claimed to love her and to love her mother. And as a working woman, she experienced sexual harassment and pregnancy discrimination by her employers. It's no wonder she was afraid to let me out of her sight until she had to. When I say she wouldn't let me out of her sight, I mean it. If I was outside playing, she was outside too. If I was at my friend's house across the street, we were in the front yard where Mama could see us from our front porch. When I went to my first football game as a first-year high school student, Mama sat right next to me. I wasn't allowed to leave my seat unless she went with me. Mama told me in her last year that she was sorry, that she understood while her intent was to keep me safe, she had hurt me in the process. By the time I was 15 years old, our relationship was so hostile and so very unhealthy, I moved from my mom's home in Tennessee to my dad's home in Alabama. I had only just reconnected with him 2 years earlier after being separated from him since I was a baby. If Mama was strict, Dad was about as lenient as they came. During this time, I lived as if I didn't have a mother. I didn't call, I didn't write, and she didn't either. I was finally free of her and her impossibly high standards, and she was no doubt glad to have a break from me too. But I did have a mother, and one who had instilled in me her very deep love of learning. So when I found out I was pregnant at 16 years old, I sobbed. I sobbed not because of the enormous task ahead of me that centered on this helpless human I was about to bring into the world, but I sobbed because my hopes for college were dashed. But they weren't, because my mother also taught me to be relentlessly persistent. She called it hard-headed, but when a colleague recently used the term relentlessly persistent to describe me, I realized that's really what it is. Mama and I weren't hard-headed. We're both open to learning new things, but what we're not open to is compromising on what is right. Whether it was her fighting with Sears to make sure they honored every word of the warranty they sold her for the air conditioning unit she purchased for our very small home, or if it's me making sure someone has something special to call their own, like a crocheted blanket, she was, and I am, relentlessly persistent. So pregnant at 16, I did what she had prepared me to do all my short life, to relentlessly persist. Now in pursuit of a better life for myself so that my son could also have a better life. Through a series of incredibly fortunate and also sometimes very devastating events, and surrounded by gracious family, friends, and community members, I've been able to do just that. Many have cheered me on, pulled me up the ladder, and fought to get me to the table. One day, as all of these great things were happening, Mama called to say she had breast cancer. Inflammatory breast cancer, no less, a rare and aggressive cancer with just a 5-year survival rate of 40%. Mama was one of the 60% who didn't live to see 5 more years. Hard-headedness and relentless persistence sometimes just aren't enough. So when it became clear that she wasn't going to see the end of the year, I postponed my PhD studies, left my son in the care of my partner at the time, and moved into my sister's one-bedroom apartment where my mother was by then living. If I live to be 100, and I absolutely do plan to do just that, the last 8 weeks of my mother's life will forever be 6 of the most beautiful weeks of my own life. The last 2, though, they hurt like hell. When you know death is coming, it changes your why. Our why became to be the mother and daughter we were meant to be. So we talked about things that made us happy, we did things that made us laugh, and we apologized for being shits to one another. Mama passed at 51, making me a motherless daughter at the age of 33. After her memorial, relentless persistence kicked back in, and I headed back to Nebraska to finish my PhD. 2 years later, I landed a job at Southern Illinois University, where I've built my career and found my community. I turned 51 in 2020, and in the years leading up to it, I spent a lot of time thinking about what it meant that I would live to be older than Mama, that I would soon reach an age for which I have no reference for in her life. What would she have been like at the age of 55, at 60, or 72, which is how old she'd be if she were here today? What advice would she have for me as I enter into menopause? What would she think about her grandson and his beautiful family? Would she live with me and love on those grandkids with me and enjoy spending time with my dogs at the same time? I think she would. I'm 54 now, so I've had some time to think about what it means to become an old woman when the woman who should have been my role model is gone. My thoughts change daily, so this is where I am today. Growing old is a gift, and one that I'm working very hard sometimes to embrace in all of its ways. Since turning 51, I'm very conscious of the fact that if I was my mother, I wouldn't have the moments with my grandkids that I do. I'm also becoming more aware of how I'm not my mother. I am alive, and I'm not going to be afraid anymore. Growing old is a privilege, so I'm taking risks and leveraging that privilege for the benefit of my health and for the benefit of my community. Growing old means it's my turn to take down the fences that required ladders to begin with. It's my turn to remove the walls that made the tables hard to find. Risks. I'm on a freaking stage doing something I never would have imagined doing, but I'm doing it because I've made the choice to surround myself with some amazing, brilliantly passionate, generously loving, imperfectly faulty, relentlessly persistent, old and young women like the ones on the stage here with me tonight. I see Mama in them, and I hope they see Mama in me too.